everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jen Van Corey, Student Life Coordinator at the College of Southern Maryland. On behalf of Student Life and Athletics and the Equity and Inclusive Diversity Office, we would like to welcome Mr. Huwe Burton. Due to flawed investigative techniques, as well as other factors such as youth, Mr. Burton was wrongfully convicted of a felony and spent 19 years in prison for a crime he did not commit before he was released on parole in 2009. After a request by the Innocence Project, both Innocence Project attorneys and the Bronx District Attorney, Darcel Clark's Conviction and Integrity Unit, worked over a 2-year period on a comprehensive reinvestigation of the case. The Innocence Project, founded in 1992 by Peter Neufeld and Barry Scheck at Cardozo School of Law, exonerates the wrongfully convicted through DNA testing and reforms the criminal justice system to prevent future injustice. Their work centers on freeing the staggering number of innocent people who remain incarcerated and to bring reform to the system responsible for their unjust imprisonment. We're honored to have Mr. Burton here today sharing his story. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Please submit your questions or comments through the Q&A function. Melissa Chambers, Student Life Coordinator, and Tim Finner, Program Coordinator of the Men of Excellence Program, will be monitoring the Q&A and share your questions with the presenters. Also, please remember to be courteous and respectful to our presenters and your fellow students and attendees. Okay, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Huwe Burton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for the introduction. So I know we have about an hour or so, I really want to get into it because I'm going to try to wrap up the last 31 years of my life. So this story starts when I was 16 years old as a high school sophomore living in the Bronx. I was there living with my mom and my dad. We owned a 3-family private home in the Bronx. On January 3rd, my mom was just starting a 2-week vacation from work. She was a registered nurse. And my dad was out of the country at the time, visiting Jamaica, visiting his mom at the time. And it was my first day back to school after the holiday break. The day started as normal as any other day would have started. I got up, got ready, got dressed for school. I ate. And when I was leaving to walk out of the door, my mom was on the couch. And the last thing I said to her was that, I was going to do a little bit better in school because I was beginning to lose interest in school. So we laughed about it and I left. I went to school for, the whole day. And I came home that afternoon. When I got to the house, I noticed that my mom's car wasn't in the driveway. So I'm thinking, well, she just started a vacation. She should be out running errands. So I come in through the downstairs door and go up to the apartment. As I'm coming to the second floor apartment door, I can hear the telephone ringing. So I opened the door and I grabbed the phone because it was right as you opened our apartment door. And it was a friend of mine who asked if I could, if I wanted to come by. So I told her, yeah, I could come by. My mom is not home, so I could go. And by the time I come back, she should be home. So I turned right around and I left the house. I went to her house. I returned about 5:30 that afternoon. And I noticed the car was still gone. So I'm saying, okay, well, she should be home any minute now. I went in, now I'm taking off my things and I'm walking towards the back of the apartment where the bedrooms are. Before getting into my bedroom, I noticed that my parents' bedroom, the door was ajar, which was something that was strange. We normally close doors when no one was in the house. So out of curiosity, I go into the room to see why is this door open? And when I went into the room, I found my mom. She had been stabbed to death. And I immediately, I'm screaming, I'm crying. I went to grab the telephone to call the police from the telephone that was in the bedroom. But I noticed there was no cord from the base to the receiver. whoever did it had taken the cord out and they had bound her wrists with the cord. So I ran out to the telephone in the hallway and I called the police from there. I couldn't stay in the apartment. I ran from there, I ran outside and waited for the police to come. When they got there, I told them where I was for the day and what I'd come in to find. They were asking me if I noticed if anything was out of the ordinary, was anything strange. I said, yeah, her car is not here. When I left this morning, the car was here. So they had me sitting there. They brought me down to the precinct. They asked me, tell them the same thing again, where I was for the day. I told them they had me call my father in Jamaica from the precinct. He took the first plane back to the States. They asked me if I had any place to go. I had a godmother that lived not too far from us in the Bronx. So they finally brought me there. I stayed in the bed from the 3rd until the 5th. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My father came back to the States. He checked in on me and had to go deal with all of the affairs of my mom's passing. So as I said, I couldn't eat. I couldn't really sleep. On January 5th, the police officers called my godmother and said that they wanted to bring me down to the precinct for a polygraph test. I had no desire to move. I really couldn't, but I wanted to know, what happened to my mom and if whatever they needed from me, if it could help find what happened to my mom, it would be okay. So I pulled myself out of the bed and they came to pick me up and brought me down to the precinct. They asked me when we got there, they were asking me the same things again from the, my whereabouts on the 3rd. I'm telling them the same thing that I told them on the 3rd. Maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours into this interview, it turned from being an interview to being an interrogation. And they said that they had evidence that they knew I wasn't in school that morning. And immediately I start crying and I'm asking for my father and they're telling me that, you'll see your father, but I need to tell them what happened. I'm telling them that, I didn't commit this crime. And, they say, well, we know that you weren't in school and we also have evidence that leads us to believe you are the one who committed this. And I'm telling them no. And the more that I'm telling them no, the more they're insisting that you did and that I was going to tell them what they needed to know. So again, as I said, I'm asking for my father. Unbeknownst to me, my father is in the precinct, but they're telling him that I don't want to see him. And they're not letting me know that he's right downstairs. Finally, they tell me, they say, well, we know that you went to your friend's house, your girlfriend or whatever, and that you guys had sex. But what you didn't know is that you're 16 and that she's 13 going on 14. What that constitutes is statutory rape. If you don't tell us that you committed this crime, not only are you going to go to jail for the murder of your mom, but we're also going to put you in prison for statutory rape. But if you do say that if you do say you committed this crime, we won't put you in prison for statutory rape and your dad can come and pick you up from family court. The reason why they were telling me these things because they knew that I had no prior involvement with law enforcement. I had never been questioned by law enforcement before. And I just saw one of the most traumatic things that a child could ever see in their life. They knew that this was a right ground to get me to say whatever they wanted me to say, or whatever they, wanted me to get me to say. So this goes on for a while, and finally, they say, well, you know what? If you say this, we'll make sure that your dad can come and pick you up from family court. And only thing I wanted to do while in that interrogation room was get out of there. I hadn't slept, I hadn't really eaten. I just wanted to get out of that room. And they made me feel that the only way that I could get out of that room or to stop this was to do what they were telling me to do. They brought me into that precinct about 5:30 on January 5th. By the time they extracted a confession or got me to agree to that, it was almost 10 after 3 in the morning. They got me to say that because they told me your dad will come and pick you up and you can put all this behind you. And me being 16, naive, and never having any involvement with law enforcement, I believed them and did what they instructed me to do. Even as they're leading me out of the precinct with the infamous picture of my perp walk, and that picture, I'm still believing in my 16-year-old head that they're on their way to take me to family court and my dad is coming to get me. That didn't happen. I was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. And that set off a many year fight trying to prove my innocence. My dad gave up everything he had, his life savings, to put a defense together for me. I had one of the best defense attorneys in the country at the time, but they were just so hell-bent on making sure that what they did stuck. It didn't matter who I had at my defense table. In my case, one of the things that's important to know before I go any further is that a week after my mom was murdered, remember I said the car was missing, her car was missing. Well, they found her car. They found her car on the same day of her funeral, which was January 11th. And it was also the same day I was indicted. So the police from the Bronx had gotten a call that they had actually found this car. So they rushed to Mount Vernon to find out who was driving this car so they could close their case. To their horror, when they got to the precinct, the person driving the car was our downstairs tenant, who we had rented the apartment to, he and his girlfriend, maybe about a month and a half prior to that. And someone who they questioned on January 3rd and they deemed to be someone of no importance. They have a problem. You have a confession, a detailed confession from a 16-year-old child saying that he killed his mom. But you have the tenant who has an extensive criminal history in possession of the car, someone whom you questioned a week before. So what they did is actually conspired with this gentleman to make it, further their story about me committing the crime. They actually conspired with the murderer to cover up a murder because they could not answer the question of what they did or said to a 16-year-old child to make him say that he committed this if he really didn't. And what we didn't know at the time is that they had done the same thing to two other teenagers that we know of just a few months prior to this happening to me. So they had a pattern of this, and this would have brought all of that to light. So they doubled down on their efforts. So in any event, we fought for 3 years, and finally, after a 3-year fight, I was sentenced to 15 to life. I appealed. The first court, they allowed us in, they allowed us argument, but they said that none of our issues had any merit. We went to the next court, they didn't allow us entry, and finally, my attorney told me that we didn't have any issues that were worth federal review. So I was pretty much stuck with just doing the time. I began writing any organization that would be an advocate for people who had claims of innocence. I did that every time I could. Every chance I got, I wrote to people and just asked them, begged them, just please take a look at this case. And some wrote back, some didn't. I remember writing to the Innocence Project years ago, and they did write back, and they told me that we don't deal with cases that don't have issues of DNA at the time. But what they did is forwarded the case to another law clinic in Chicago that did deal with false confessions from juveniles. They saw the case, they got interested in the case, and they took the case on. By this time, I had maybe about 16, 17, 18 years inside when they decided that they would get on board. I was released in 2009 and still committing to fighting. I was still on parole. I needed to have my name cleared. That was the only thing that mattered. So again, this set off a 10-year fight, and we were piecing together all of the things in this case that they were trying to keep hidden. Finally, in 2016, we hit a wall, and we asked the Innocence Project to get back on board, and to just, just to take a look. And there was a conviction integrity unit newly being formed in the Bronx, headed by Dawson Clark. So all of this, it took to reopen this case and to look at it and peel through everything. Something that they knew less than a week after it happened. It took us 30 years and 3 law clinics to piece together and get us to the point that we're at now. So, I mean, pretty much that's been the last 30 years of my life. The biggest advocate that I had, my father, as I said, he did everything. And, finally, age and, the conditions and the circumstances, everything began to catch up to him and his health began to fail. So I lost him in 2005. So from 2005 to 2009, those last 4 years were, the times that I didn't have him. But his presence put a fire in me that kind of allows me to keep doing what it is that I'm doing now, and to make sure that I push to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else again. Because just as I'm sitting here telling you about this story of the last 30 years, it could have went left. I could still be sitting in there asking people to please hear me. I'm innocent and I shouldn't be here, which is why it's important that we do the things that we're doing now, just to raise awareness that there are others just like me. So again, as I said, this has been the last 30 years of my life, and I'm sure that there's a lot of questions. And I like to answer questions. I like to have more of a dialogue than me just having a monologue and just talking. I like to engage you guys and know what's on your mind. So please feel free to ask me anything.
Hi, Mr. Burton.
Hey.
We have a question that was pre-submitted prior to the event today, and I just wanted to go ahead and ask it.
Okay.
What did you do daily to keep your sanity, knowing you were innocent? And when did you realize I have to do something to help myself?
I'll start from the last question first and work my way back. From day one, I knew, being terrified in an environment that you know nothing about, I knew that, look, I have to fight, I have to get out of here. So that was always my mindset from day one, although there were days that were harder than others to deal with everything, but you kind of keep that mindset. What did I do daily? My father was a musician. He was a sax player. One of the many things that he gave me was the ability to appreciate music. And while I was away, they allowed you to get instruments that within means in terms of price. So being able to play music, being able to fight the case, having my father, and the ability to run. Running was something that became very, very therapeutic for me. Running became a way for me to leave that place for however long I was running for and just go wherever I wanted to go. So it was all of the small things. And even under those circumstances, I was able to meet some very smart, inspirational, funny people. And they kind of keep you going and you kind of keep them going. But, it's not one thing that I can point to. It's so many things. I mean, it was a 20-year journey in prison. So different things you need to keep you going.
Hello, Mr. Burton.
Hey, how's it going?
All right, we have a question from Drew Bowman.
Okay.
How do you feel about all the time lost, and how do you adjust?
I wrestle with it a lot. I look at a lot of the time lost, and I look at what people my age were doing in their 20s as they were learning about who they are, in their 30s, defining that, raising their families, and then in their 40s, considering, I think I might be up for retirement soon, or I've made enough money, or I want to go into this different thing. By the time I had gotten out, I was just trying to get started. So all of the time, I wasn't bitter about it, but it hurt that much time had been taken away from me, unjustifiably so. But the counterbalance to that was, well, it was all taken from you. You have to figure out why, and you have to make sure that someone else does not have to go through this. I don't care how many people you have to talk to, or whatever, just make sure someone else doesn't go through this, because you know what you endured. And I think anyone who questioned themselves even a little bit, not to say that I'm any better or any stronger, but if you questioned yourself a little bit about the future, you would not make it through. So, I don't think anyone should have to ever go through that. So again, that's the counterbalance to feeling that so much has been taken away. But in the return, so much has been given, if that makes sense.
We have a question, actually two questions from Iris. How was your innocence proven? And did they go after the downstairs neighbor about the car?
My innocence was proven because we were able to demonstrate that what the police did was very coercive. The statement that they got me to write, when we look at the facts of the case, did not happen. They actually got me to write that I owed a local drug dealer money, and because I was supposed to sell these drugs for him. But instead of selling the drugs, I used the drugs, and he called the morning of, and I told him, well, I don't have the money, but I have a car. I'll leave the keys on the floor on the driver's side, and you can come pick it. That's what they had me write. That's the statement they had me write. Now they have a problem. The drug dealer is, now you find the tenant in the car, none of this fits. So all of these things, when they started to reinvestigate it, the prosecutor in the case, the amount of stuff that she withheld. My teacher that morning, when they initially asked her, is he in school? She made a mistake and said, oh no, he wasn't, but corrected herself and put it in writing and called and said, I made a mistake. He was here. I marked him on the wrong day, but he was here, which would have put me in school at the time in which this happened. So now they're like, no, we can't put him in school. We can't put the tenant as the last ones to see her because we made the child say that he killed his mother. So we have to hide all of that exculpatory evidence. We have to hide it, and we have to hope that it never comes to light. As a result of the tenant testifying at the grand jury, he was released on his own recognizance and only charged with grand larceny. But he was on parole at the time for rape and robbery, and has had a history since he was a small child of psychiatric issues. But the year was 1989. There were no background checks as far as landlords, so my parents didn't know any of this stuff. So that's who we allowed into our home. and they tried to cover that. So this is why I say that law enforcement conspired with the actual murderer to cover up a murder, cover up a murder. So, you know, these are the things that went on. What happened to the tenant? When they released him on his own recognizance that year, later that year, after his testimony at the grand jury, he was subsequently killed within months of being released. So he was never held responsible for what he did. So it was just me standing there left holding that, and all of the evidence that would have proven that this child was in school, and that the tenants downstairs, according to their original statements, were the last ones to see my mom alive. So it's a big thing. A lot of people just covering things up so they don't have to say, you know what, we made a child say he did the unthinkable. And it took us, like I said, it took us 30 years to reverse that.
Thank you. We have a question from Drew again. Did you
Sure.
stay in New York or leave after all this?
No, I stayed in New York. I was on parole in New York. So remember, when I came home in 2009, my innocence wasn't proven yet. As far as they were concerned, I was a sick piece of work who they let out on parole, and now I'm under parole supervision. My innocence had not been proven yet. So I stayed in New York. I lived in Washington Heights. I've lived in New Rochelle. New York is the city I'm born and raised in. And I wasn't supposed to leave the first time. I didn't, that thing of, I felt like I was getting pushed out of my own city. I did, after I got a bit of financial literacy, I learned a few things, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not abandoning my city, but I know that I have to do things outside of my city, and then come back and do different things. So no, I stay close to New York. I'm right across the water, but I'm not actually in the city
Thank you.
no more.
We have a question from Francis. Where did you find hope when it seemed hopeless?
My father. I've never seen a human being that strong before. You think about it. You're dealing with providing a defense for your son. You're also dealing with the murder of your wife, and everything that comes with that. You're being ostracized, and you're facing ridicule from people in the neighborhood, and people want to know, why are you going up to this jail every week to see this boy? Leave him alone. He would have none of it. So that kind of strength, and then to see him, just watch him deteriorate over the years, it's like, no, you can draw strength from that, and I do. He never gave up on me or himself. And by the time the last time I saw him was 2003. He had come upstate. He had come back to the country because I convinced him to sell a house in the Bronx, because it's like, listen, it's just you. Sell the house. I'm grown now. I was 28 at the time. So I said, sell it. So he sold it and moved back home to Jamaica. But his health got bad, so he had to come back up. And when he came up, I didn't know how bad it had gotten. He came up with a cousin of mine. They brought him up to the visit room. He didn't know who I was. The early dementia really took hold of him. So I draw strength from that. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Jennifer Fassel.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. I'm wondering how you were able to maintain a sense of hope throughout your incarceration. Were there ever times when you lost sight of hope?
No. The one thing you can't do is ever lose sight of hope. There are days where it's like, wow, this was a heavy day. I don't know if things are going to, but you can't lose that hope. There has to be that small glimmer there. And for me, it was, I'm innocent. I'm not supposed to be here. Do not allow this to change who you are. Don't allow this to make you a bitter person. Was I angry about what was going on? Absolutely. But don't allow it to make you become bitter because now you're rendered useless. You can't fight. So those, for me, those are the things that I always leaned on. I never lost sight of that. And again, as I said, I had a great example to show me, like, don't ever give up. My father wasn't, as far as academics, didn't go very far in school. None of that stuff, nothing traditional. Just a small Jamaican man that, was passionate about his son and passionate about the truth. So, no, I never lost sight of him. It's because of those things that, I was able to hold on to hope.
We also have another question from an anonymous attendee.
Mhm.
What happened to the people who were at fault in the handling of your case when the truth came out?
Oh, great question. The officers in the case, they got promotions. I don't know if the promotion was a direct result of my conviction, but they got promotions. Some wound up working as investigators in the DA's office. Go figure. Um, the prosecutor in my case, as of today, she is a judge in Queens, New York, sitting on the bench. That's what I guess. As I said, I don't know if it's a result of my conviction, but or the result of a bunch of convictions, sort of like mine. But she's a judge, so everybody is pretty much moved up in their status, which is why I do what I do now, and that's to hold people accountable. Um, any victories that I get, parole, exoneration, it's great. But those are small victories for me. Those are not victories for my parents. What they did to them, what they did to me and them, holding them accountable will be when my parents receive justice, not a day before. So yeah, that's what they got for their troubles.
Thank you for that. A question from Ainsley McLaughlin. Did you ever go back and talk to the people responsible for this?
No. No, there is nothing. There's nothing to talk about. They knew exactly what they were doing. They canvassed the neighborhood. You're asking, obviously, doing their job, you have to ask about anyone who was in the house. So canvassing the neighborhood, they were getting a story that, wow, him and his mother were, very tight, very loving. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't have any. No, he doesn't do anything around here. Oh no, there's no fingerprints on file. He's never been questioned before. They knew that they could get me to pretty much say whatever they wanted, and it's, when I think about it, knowing all that, therein, that's where the crime is. That's where the crime happened. You didn't afford my mother a proper investigation. Um, Less than 48 hours after she was murdered, you were carting her son um, off onto prison. You didn't investigate that. And my father suffered for the next 13 years and still trying to hold, safe face. So there's really nothing for us to talk about. I want to talk inside of a courtroom. And I want them to tell people what they knew, what they did. That's what we need. But talking to them, I have no desire.
We have a question from anonymous attendee. Did you watch America's Got Talent this year? There was a singer who was in jail for many years and he was helped just like you.
Archie Williams, man. Oh man, wasn't it great watching him, man? If you guys saw it, man, wasn't it great watching him? Oh man, that to see him, to see someone have those kind of dreams, hold on to your dreams, and then come and then bring it to fruition. It's like just that in and of itself, to me was the victory. It's like, you won, you won it already, man. Great, man. Yeah, I know him. I don't know him well. I met him at a Innocence Project conference, but great personality. Yeah.
Wow, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Anonymous. What is your life like now?
Getting to the truth, man. Holding people accountable. We're as citizens, we're always told that we're held accountable for anything we think, feel, say, or do. I believe it, and I'm just want to hold law enforcement accountable for what they did and what they said, and the way in which they thought. So life for me now is pretty much fighting for that, putting the pieces back together. I'm 48, so this is the first time that in a little over a year that everything has been restored to me, all of my rights. So I'm a 48-year-old, 16-year-old again. So just exploring, learning, just learning, and just taking every moment and being appreciative of it. That's what it kind of looks like for me now. I spent years when I was home working in construction. I was an elevator mechanic. From the day that I walked out in 2009, I've been working. I had a job as I walked out the door. But I've always worked to pay a bill or to make someone else rich. Now I'm taking time to invest in me, so that's what it looks like nowadays.
Thank you. So we have a question from Darius. You said you've helped people who were in the same situation you've been through. Mm-hmm. How many people have you saved from being falsely accused?
Well, and let me correct that, not saving them individuals like me, I saved people from that. No, bringing awareness to people's situations. That's what I'm doing. I want to be in a position one day where it's like, look, I am responsible for helping get this person out or that person out. That day hasn't come yet. I'm sure it will one day. But just making people aware that there are still people. There is, part of the job that I can do now. Because when I was sitting there, I would just wish someone would say, "Man, listen, there's a guy in there, and he shouldn't be there." So that's what I do. But again, as I said, in answer to the question, I hope to one day be responsible for bringing a lot of people out of there who should.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Andrea. The work you are doing is so important. I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. Mm-hmm. Was there anyone else supporting you along the way besides your father?
Yes. I did have support along the way. My family is based in Jamaica, England, and here. I am one of those kids that when my parents were born, they were almost 50. So everybody is much older and people have moved on. A lot of people, died, whatever the case may be. But definitely having family support, I've had that. Uncles, aunts, cousins, I've had that. And especially the last portion of the time that I was doing that, people kind of just really galvanized around, let's check about his well-being. So I'm thankful for that. And I had friends that I grew up with that they made sure that they stayed in contact. And even though they couldn't provide anything financially, to get the letters and to know how they're doing and know that they're getting on in life, those things were priceless. Money you're going to use, but to see those things, to get those letters, that stuff was priceless to me. So in answer to that, yeah, I had a lot of support, a lot of different support.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. We have a question from Darnell. What are your general feelings about the justice system after all of this happened to you?
It's flawed. It's always been flawed. And it's up to us. It's up to the small people, whatever we want to call ourselves, it's up to us to make sure that, it's dealt with right when it comes to us. That's our responsibility. I have no faith in that. I have faith in people. I have faith in people who want change. So the only thing that we can do is say, okay, educate ourselves and make sure that this doesn't happen. For instance, had I known a little bit about law, I would have known that they couldn't do what they did to me. The fact that I knew nothing, the fact that I'm traumatized because the only thought in my head is what I came home to find. But if I would have known something different, I would have known that what you all are doing is not right. And I want to talk to somebody right now. I would have known those things. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a question from Ray. I'm so sorry for what happened, and I admire you and your positivity in life, despite of what happened. I just finished my research paper about the erroneous convictions due to misleading forensic science, specifically forensic statistics,
Mhm.
and it was an eye-opening for me.
Um, you know, when we talk about cases of innocence, just being around the Innocence Project and going down to the offices, you're able to learn so much different things about the cases that they're fighting. People are there because of eyewitnesses that police have propped up, or an informant in a jail, or a coerced confession. You start to learn about all of these things. And when you start to learn about it, you say, okay, well, where is the crime fighting going? Where is the policing going on? If these, if this is the common thing, like you just try to close cases at the behest of what, just ruining lives. It's weird to me. It's just weird. Yeah.
I have a question from Darius. Do you think it would have been different if you were not Black?
Yeah, you know what? Let's look at it like this. My mom was doing nursing in England. She married my father in 1970. They came over here. She continued doing nursing. He left his band, started doing interior, exterior decorating to help, provide a living for the two of them. I come along 2 years later. Some years after that, they become homeowners, real estate investors, while still doing jobs. And then this happens. That story is, according to the American narrative, is the story. If those were not two Black immigrants, if they were from, say, Poland, they would have afforded that child every stop to find out what happened to his mother. And we're going to bring the killers to justice, not arresting the child 48 hours later. And that is also indicative of the time that we were living in New York City. 1989 was a very, very interesting place. That year, I believe there were about 2,400 murders in the city. There were so many young Black boys that were being thrown into jail unjustifiably so. And I bring this to a lot of people's attention just to give you a framework. They arrested me on January 6, 1989. I was arrested and charged. On April 19th, a little over 90 days later, they arrested 5 young men in a park and said that they raped a jogger. And that case became something that polarized the city. But just to show you my case, the Central Park case, and many other cases happened right around that time in 1989. And now, 20, 15, 30 years later, we're finding out, no, these kids didn't do anything. So again, if my parents were anything other than Black, would it have gone down like this? I don't think so. No, I really don't believe that. It would have been dealt with differently. It would have been dealt with very differently. They would have made sure that they covered every base, man, if for nothing else, to make sure that, we find out and give the child some degree of closure. What happened to his mother? That's what they would have done. That's what the police work would have been based on. Not trying their best to find ways to lock me up. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Kiara. Were there any positives you were able to take away from such an awful experience and/or your time in prison?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I learned of a strength in me that I didn't know I had. I did not know I had. I walked in prison as a terrified 16-year-old, all of 5'5", 150 pounds, or something like that. I walked out 37, 200 some odd pounds, and with lifelong friends who we can still call and talk to each other and lean on each other. That was one of the greatest takeaways, because it's my opinion that those who did this to me, they never wanted this to come to light. They never wanted me to see the light of day. And they hoped that I would be driven insane by having to carry this burden that was never mine to carry, or that someone would do something to me there and I would never make it out. So the fact that I made it out, the fact that I got out of there in sound mind and body, and I left with great friends, that's a positive takeaway, although I lost so much more. But again, I learned the strength in me that I didn't know I had. So, hell of a price to pay to learn of that strength, but I have to look at something positive out of it. I have to.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. We have a question from Chelsea. Do you currently work with or partner with the Innocence Project? In what ways do you continue to make sure others don't have to go through what you went through?
I partner with the Innocence Project by, speaking. Anywhere I can get a chance to speak and raise awareness, I do. But what I like to do, I don't like to just talk and say, okay, well, this is what happened to me, and and then that's that. There has to be a call to action after that. We have to hold fire to each other's feet. And this is why I go out and I speak because if I don't, criminal justice reform, reentry, all of these things will just be the hashtag of yesterday. And people's lives will still be affected by these things. People are still going to be coming home from prison long after people have gone on about their business, and prison is no longer a political hot button. So what I do is talk to people and keep them in the loop to say, oh, listen, after the TVs and all the cameras go away from this, people's lives are still going to be impacted by it. We have to do something, So that's pretty much what I do as far as partnering with the IP. And again, in the future, I hope to be doing even more, because there's so much more to be done.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Francis.
Okay.
Have you been able to fully grieve your mother's death since that terrible day?
I didn't get a chance to grieve until I really came home in 2009. When this happened, there was no time to process any grieving, because 48 hours later, I was in handcuffs, fighting for my life. In some cases, literally. And, you go through that and you find yourself in prison, and you find yourself adapting to the culture of prison. And adapting to the culture of prison, you have to close certain things off, certain things that give you moments of weakness. And I never gave myself a chance to really grieve. It wasn't until I came home in 2009 that, I really had a chance to just process that. I think I cried just like, or everything that was just there just came out. I think when I went up to the cemetery when I came home. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. We have a question from Drew. Did any family stand by your side other than your father?
Yes, I did. I did have family that stood by me. But as I said, I had family that was in England, Jamaica, and people are pretty spread out. Even those that were in the country, you have some in Florida. They were all over the place. They stood by me, and I appreciated. I knew that a lot couldn't get to me to get into the visit room. I couldn't sit in front of them and talk, but I would hear from them. We would write. Anytime it came time for everybody to write in support of me being, released, everybody made sure that they got together and made that happen. So, definitely thankful for that.
Thank you for that. We have a question from Ron. Ron said, was the prosecutor the same one who prosecuted the Central Park Five? And did anyone ever apologize?
No. To apologize would be to, I guess, acknowledge that they did wrong. To this day, they don't feel they did anything wrong. They'll say, we didn't do anything wrong. No, it wasn't the same prosecutor as the Central Park case. However, in two different offices, one was in Manhattan, my prosecutor was in the Bronx. But it's pretty much the same mindset with most of them, especially during that time. Just get a conviction. It doesn't matter how flawed the evidence is, just get a conviction. So.
We have one last comment from Sybil. Thank you so much for your strength and for sharing your strength with us. Man, your dad. I love your tribute to him. He was handling your defense, the murder of his wife, and being the best dad imaginable. You are his fitting legacy. He raised a magnificent, strong human being.
I thank you. That made who said that?
She is our executive director of our Equity and Inclusive Diversity Office.
I thank you. You made my day. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Burton.
Again, thank you guys for having me. But always remember, even after the cameras go off, the work is not done. The work is just starting. And I always say that, the people who are committed to making sure that things don't change, they don't get tired. So, we can't tire in our efforts to bring awareness and to bring truth to this. So, I thank you guys. And please, you guys got to continue doing what you do and hold people accountable and hold yourselves accountable.
Thank you, Mr. Burton and the Innocence Project for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your experience. You've certainly given us much to think about and to consider. If students and attendees are interested in becoming advocates for criminal justice reform and the prevention of future injustice, how do they get involved? Again, thank you everyone for joining us for today's event. Could you share that with us, Mr. Burton, if students want to get involved?
If they want to get involved, when I'm asked that a lot, I often tell people, if there is a chapter of, Innocence Project, wherever you're at, volunteer, go and volunteer. I remember before I was exonerated, and, they would ask me to come by the office when I was working in the city. And, you know, just to go over some, you know, some paperwork or something, you know, they want to talk to me about something. But I noticed when I would get there, you're just so inspired because you see so many people just working towards the same goal. From the person handling the case to a person answering the phone. And I learned so much just from walking around in the hallways at the IP. So I would encourage anybody to, you know, volunteer. You're going to learn so much about what is being done in this country with regards to its practices with regards to prison and the innocent. You know, so involve yourself in it. It will inspire you. Trust me, it will inspire you. So if you can, volunteer for the IP. And local politics. I never thought I would be one saying stuff like that, but I realized that a lot of things when it comes to laws that affect people in prison, it's a lot of local laws. And if we get educated as far as local politics, it will help us understand what's going on, as opposed to just living in the results of decisions that are made.
Great. Again, thank you everyone for joining us for today's event with Mr. Burton. Stay healthy and stay well.
Take care, guys.